Brilliant. And I shall share my slides here. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Just let me know as soon as you can share. You can see my screen, sorry. Okay, that's it. Right. Okay. So, let me know if you can see my screen. And can you all see my screen? Hello? Praise? Can you see my screen? I can't see your chat, so if you can just unmute
Yes,
and let me know.
I can see your screen.
Okay, that's fine. Good. Good, good, good. I won't be able to see your chats for now. Let me move it this way. Okay, so welcome to this free taster slash end of year masterclass has been put together by Sterling Tech Solutions. Most of you will be familiar, or maybe some of you have just recently seen us on social media, and hence you're here today. Some of you are existing or past either even interns or people who have engaged with us before. Right, so whatever category you fall into, welcome to you. And I hope you've all had a good Christmas break and getting excited and looking forward to 2026. So this is what we're calling our end of year career transition masterclass. Today this masterclass is really going to be focusing, oops, what happened there? Sorry. Okay. So this masterclass is going to be focusing on GDPR, data protection. So again, most of you probably would have heard about GDPR, would have heard about data protection, would have heard about data privacy. But this time around, we're trying to focus on, I hope you can still see my screen. We're going to focus on you as a business analyst or a project manager exploring, data protection or becoming a GDPR analyst. That's not to say that that's the only path, but this is something that is in the market. And recently, we started seeing more interest in these particular two parts. So, some of you, please let me know in the chat if you have ever worked as a business analyst or as a project manager before. So not GDPR related, but just whether it's IT, whether it's process improvement, whether it's digital transformation, whatever field domain you have been in. If you have worked as a business analyst or a project manager, can you just type it in the chat? I'll come and have a look at it later. So some of you have worked as business analysts or project managers over time, and you're almost thinking, maybe I should look at something more specialist or even explore data protection. So this again will be very suitable to you. So who am I? I am Veronica Dukwe Yusuf. I'm the founder of Sterling Tech Solutions. I've been in this data protection slash privacy space for nearly 9 years now. And I've worked across global organizations across, of course, global means across the world. My not most, well, one of the roles I finished last year was a Canadian organization. They're across 60 countries. And so most of the work that I've done have been with multinationals, as it were, so quite global. And then I was a global, what you call program manager. And so I have a wealth of experience starting from the ground all the way to senior management. And so I believe I have a wealth of experience to share with you. And essentially, I've consulted as what you call a contractor, or even as a permanent employee within organizations. So I've been through the breadth and the length, as you would imagine. How did I start? So I did start as a GDPR business analyst. So I'd worked as a business analyst for a good number of years. And I started hearing about data protection. I started hearing about GDPR 2018 when everyone was talking about compliance, being compliant organizations were, within the EU or those that were operating in the EU were thinking about, this whole GDPR compliance thing and just sort of working towards being, making sure that they were ticking the right boxes and doing all of that. And so I was interested in that, and I did a very short weekend crash program, got onto a boot camp for a few weeks, and then I started applying for jobs. So my first role was what you call a GDPR business analyst. So my experience as a business analyst was very useful at the time because that was something they were looking for, but they also wanted someone that had a good understanding of the general data protection regulation. So that is what GDPR means. And so I've worked across over 10 organizations and I've helped quite a lot of professionals to get into that space. So that's a little bit about myself. So again, I think I already asked this to share. If you have just joined us, please put it in the chat. I'll have a look at it later. Share your background, your career goals. Why are you here today? Type it in the chat. Have you ever worked as a BA? Have you worked as a PM or just any, an IT professional and you're interested particularly in data protection, just trying to see if it's something that you can layer on top what you already have at the moment. Also, let us know how long have you been in this space, as it were, and what interests you about GDPR compliance careers, like I already said. So these are the questions that I would like for you to respond to. Just type it in the chat. And what are you most interested in? Are you interested more in the business, GDPR business analyst or GDPR project manager path? And I'll tell you the difference, shortly, and then you can decide what works for you. Okay. And of course, I've already said that the reason why we're asking for this is just so that we can maybe I can tailor most of what I'm talking about to meet the needs of those in the room today. So quickly, I'll do a very, very brief, like this is a taster session, it's just 2 hours. We're not going to do deep dive because 2 hours is not enough. But I'll just quickly, for those, maybe you've not really researched into it, you do not know so much about it, let's talk a little bit about it. Okay, so today, like I said, the focus is really for you who is thinking about launching a career in 2026 as a GDPR business analyst or a project manager. So this is for you. And the agenda, we're going to look at what is GDPR very briefly. What is a business analyst's role in a GDPR compliance project or program? What is the role of a project manager in that space as well? There's one case study or scenario just to give you an idea of how it works and the applicability in real world. I will also talk about that using that case study. We'll look at some job market opportunities, which of course you can find online. And if this is something of interest to you, what are the skills that you need to be able to get to be successful into getting into this space? Hopefully we have some time for Q&A and I'll tell you about our program. We might do a little bit behind the scenes just to talk about some projects, some GDPR compliance projects that we have in the pipeline. We have some external clients that we have started working with and some that we plan to work with in the new year. And so if this is something that you're interested in joining us, you will be exposed to these hands-on practical experience. Okay. Right, now that that's all out of the way, let's dive in. What is GDPR? It is the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the EU regulation on data privacy and protection. Of course, we know that there is also the UK GDPR since the UK exited from the EU. That is something that is also new now, and there are different privacy laws or legislation, as it were, to focus on if you are operating within the UK or you are looking to support a UK-based business. So that is another thing that we offer as part of our program. But for today, we're just looking at it from a generic standpoint. Okay. And of course, this was effective since 2018. The 25th of May was when everyone was working towards being compliant with the EU GDPR. Of course, there are questions around whether everyone was fully compliant or not. But I think from my experience, one of the things that we were saying is that, you can be in a defensible position. And of course, we had to get legal to really help us to interpret and translate what that meant for that organization at the time. And so a lot of organizations were working, they had activity, they had things, they had a roadmap that they had put in place towards attaining compliance with the EU GDPR. And of course, it wasn't something that you were going to be able to attain within weeks, months. So if I give you an example, the first project that I worked on, we started on the 20, sorry, we started in 2018, no, 2017 actually. So when I joined, the team had just done 6 months. And by the time I was leaving, I had spent 5 years within that organization. And I cannot tell you that we ticked off all the boxes. And there is no expectation that you should tick all the boxes within 6 months or 1 year. It's not prescriptive that way. But again, what the supervisory authority will be looking for within organizations is that you've got something in place, you are in somewhat of a defensible position, you're taking a risk-based approach as you look to work towards compliance. So that's just something to be mindful of. What is the scope? Now, this applies again to any organization processing personal data. Again, the GDPR applies to personal data and not just all type of data. So that's something to always remember. Personal data of EU individuals, it is your personal data if you're within the EU that the GDPR looks to protect. Okay, so just be aware of that. And the key principles really are around the fact that when personal data is processed by, any data controller, any data processor, they have to ensure lawfulness of processing. Again, it's just making sure that you are doing it in line with what the requirements of the GDPR are. So you don't just process data for the fun of it. There must be a lawful basis that really covers you as an organization or as a business that is processing personal data. So it talks about lawful basis, and there are six lawful basis. It talks about fairness, transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, integrity, and confidentiality. So these are the core principles that the GDPR really stipulates. And so anytime that an organization is processing personal data, they have got to think about these principles. And again, over 9 years, almost 9 years now, I've been in this space, and I say to organizations, if we can apply a principle-based approach, especially as a multinational that has branches all over the world, and these days we're seeing different privacy laws and legislations coming up. The US is coming up with individual state privacy laws. And so if you as an organization is operating across the globe, there is just no way that you can apply every nuance that comes from each of these local laws. And therefore, what we normally advise is a principle-based approach that cuts across regardless of the jurisdiction. So that's something to be mindful of. We're also aware that there are penalties of non-compliance. And so if an organization that you're supporting, when you become a GDPR consultant, you also have to let them know the impact of non-compliance. The fines are hefty. So just to be aware of that. And why it matters is because it affects businesses worldwide. So yes, let's even narrow down, into the EU GDPR because you are a US-based business operating in the US does not mean that you are exonerated or you are exempted, actually, you're exempt, especially if you are processing data that belongs to the guys who are at the other side of the border. So EU citizens, especially if you've got a website, a global site, and there is a chance that every individuals around the globe may access your site. So you've got to think about the EU GDPR. So you cannot say, "Oh, I'm a US business and therefore I don't care about GDPR." It doesn't work like that. So that's why most of these big US organizations, Facebook, Apple, and all the likes, yes, they're US businesses, but of course they are servicing EU individuals and therefore processing their personal data, and that brings them into scope. So again, that is why it matters or it should matter to every organization, whether you're operating, whether you're established in or outside of the EU. Okay, please, if you also have questions, just pop it in the chat. I'll come back to it. I just want us just being conscious of time so that we've got time, we can cover all that we've planned. So today I want to look at a GDPR business analyst role. And some people might just say, oh, I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know that it existed. And I'm here to tell you that it does exist. Again, when I started, that was my role, that was my title. And when the job was advertised, that was exactly what they were looking for. And so, again, that's not to say that that's the only path, right? You don't have to be a GDPR business analyst. But let's even break it down what it really means or what a GDPR business analyst would be doing or would be expected to do. So, of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are the core, responsibilities, as it were, of a GDPR business analyst. And this will be a plus to you if you have worked as a business analyst over time. And that was why I think for me, it was easy to just get a yes the day I did that interview before I got home. In fact, I got the job because they wanted somebody with that business analyst background. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Actually, very recently, I've been chased by some headhunters saying, oh, because of my business analyst background, this organization wanted somebody like with my profile for this particular GDPR compliance program. So the GDPR business analyst, now also being mindful of the fact that even though the title is GDPR business analyst, there are some organizations that may not refer to it as that. They might just call it a GDPR analyst or a data protection analyst or even a privacy analyst. Again, don't be hung up on titles as it were. But I just wanted to say that there is actually a role known as the GDPR business analyst. And what does the business analyst or GDPR business analyst do? One, they do data flow maps and they, help the organization to understand or to map the data, personal data flow, whether it's inbound and outbound data flows. And this exactly was my very first project. They wanted to do their data discovery, if you like. So again, you would hear that in that data protection space where you hear data mapping, data discovery, and all of that. Those of you who are familiar a little bit with GDPR, you hear things like you hear ROPA. So your ROPA is the record of processing activities because under the GDPR, it stipulates that data controllers, data processors should have a record of all the personal data processing activities that they are involved in or that they do, if you like. And that is something that is a legal requirement if you are caught under the GDPR. And so when organizations are trying to meet that Article 30 requirement, they will do a data mapping exercise. So a business analyst understands how to do, to maybe what you call, they start by understanding the business process. Because again, personal data will not exist, on its own in isolation. It is linked to an existing business process that, of course, the organization does. And so you would always have to think about, okay, for our marketing process, what are the personal data touch points? How do we collect personal data? How does that data flow from point A to point B to point C to point D? So the data life cycle, the business analyst comes in and then sits down to say, okay, let's see how this data flows. Where is your data? So when I started, and in fact, during that time when GDPR was quite, on everybody's radar, a lot of organizations weren't sure of where their data, their personal data, when you ask them, do we understand our data flows? Have we mapped it before? They say, oh, not quite. Or maybe it's in emails, maybe it's in CRM systems, maybe we've got this database somewhere, we've got backups here and there. So a lot of organizations could not really then hand on heart say they understood how their data flowed, whether it's inbound or outbound. And so it was important in order to meet that Article 30 requirement that they carry out that data mapping. So the business analyst comes in and you're now sitting with the various business functions that process personal data to say, let's understand your flow. Let's understand marketing. Maybe you start from do you have maybe a website? You have some forms where you capture data, or maybe you have CRMs, or maybe you market on social media, you do advertising, and people click on links, and the data is collected into, some system somewhere. So again, you will have to start across all the various functions within that organization to know, to understand how their data flows. So that is what the business analyst will do. And that was what I did. So I had to sit down to, speak with different stakeholders across the various business functions to understand the data flow. So that's typically what you will be doing. Again, personal data processing. Where are we using personal data? Where are we processing personal data? How are we capturing personal data? How are we storing the personal data? How are we even deleting if we need to? Do we have a retention policy? And all of those things will come out of your data mapping exercise. So that is what a business analyst would typically be doing. And of course, again, you would also do document there all these processing activities. You would do what you call a data processing impact assessment. You would hear about a DPIA that is connected to your risk assessment as well. So again, most organizations would have a DPIA, especially if they are caught under the GDPR. DPIA is a data protection impact assessment, right? Where if, for example, their organization is looking to introduce a new initiative where personal data will be processed, a new project, a new integration to an existing system that holds personal data, or high risk processing, high volume processing. So under the GDPR, there are certain there's a criteria that will help you to determine whether you need to carry out a DPIA. So as a business analyst, you might find yourself involved in doing that. Or depending on the maturity of the organization, they might have what you call privacy champions. Maybe those guys will be the ones doing it. But if they don't, the business analyst might be the one that will be expected to do that, or even the project manager. You also analyze compliance gaps and risks. So once you have done maybe a gap analysis, if that is something the organization needs, that is something that you might end up doing. And essentially what it is, okay, what have we done, especially around our compliance posture or requirements? Where are we? Where are the gaps? How are we looking? And all of that. You will help them to analyze these gaps and identify whatever red flags or risks they need to look into so that they can think about mitigating those risk or remediation activities, as it were. You also be gathering requirements from stakeholders because you won't be expected to sit by yourself and to figure things out. You've got to be speaking to people. So if you're considering becoming a GDPR business analyst, you've got to be open to engaging with stakeholders, speaking to different team, what do you call it, different functions in the organization. So you cannot say, oh, I don't like to talk, I'm shy and all of that. No, a GDPR business analyst will be talking. A business analyst is all the time engaging with people. You also create compliance documentation and policies. When I started as well, that was something I had to work on. Again, depending on the size, again, please be mindful of the fact that this is not an exhaustive list. And sometimes, depending on the maturity of the organization, there might be different individuals, carrying out these functions. But again, it might just be a case where maybe it's a small organization or they're not that mature. And if you wear the hat of the business analyst within a GDPR compliance project, these are the kind of things that you might find yourself. We'll look at a few jobs out there just, to give you an understanding. You'll also be supporting audit and regulatory reporting. That was something I did as well. So again, it would just be a case of, well, okay, we have this annual audit that we're doing. I think then it was the finance guys. who would normally do this but then an annual audit, and they would come to us to say, okay, let's look at, what are the requirements, because again, data protection was something that somehow will be flagged while that audit is going on, and you as a business analyst might be the one who will help them with that reporting, to pull in the relevant elements, maybe based on things that you've worked on before. So that was something that you might find yourself supporting as well. So this again is just a few, but these are like core elements that a business analyst working within the GDPR function, as it were. These are a few of the things that you'd be involved in doing. So what are the key skills that you require? Again, just looking at the other side for data mapping, again, because we're going to be doing data flows and all of that, you would need to know how to do data mapping. What does that mean? It's not coding. It has nothing to do with writing code. Sometimes you can even do this manually. Now there is, thank goodness for tooling and different tools. OneTrust, TrustArc, there's so many of them. But I mean, there are some organizations that do not have that budget, and they want someone who can do this thing for them manually. It's funny that one of the recent consulting gigs I just finished before Christmas, very big, no name, but they were moving from using a tool back to like SharePoint, so they wanted someone who knew how to use Excel. So data mapping could be, you could use a tool to carry out this data mapping that I've just mentioned, or you might be expected to just use Excel. So let me talk a little bit. And again, time permitting, I will show you a template of what it looks like by the end of the day. If you're carrying out this data mapping exercise, what is the output? What is the deliverable? What does it look like? What does a ROPA? Because again, why we're doing this is because we're trying to comply with Article 30's requirement of having a record of processing activities. So a data mapping I've already mentioned, you could use Excel. And so what will be on your Excel? You just want to have a list of all the various business functions within that organization that process personal data. So from sales, from marketing, from DevOps, IT, HR, all the lists, all of them, you have that. And then you now look at all the personal data processing activities. So you can use Excel to do that listing. But again, what you're trying to do in order for you to actually capture or map these data flows, you will have to ask assessment questions. So things like, what personal data processing activities do you engage in? What is the type of data? So the data elements. So is it name, email address, phone number, things like that? Are you sharing with third party, or is that data in-house? Do you have a lawful basis for processing? And there are a few questions that would help you to be able to successfully carry out that data mapping exercise. So my point here is it doesn't always have to be a tool, because again, trust me, these tools are built, for example, those of you who are familiar with OneTrust, when I used OneTrust back in the days, the export was just a CSV file. So Excel, rows and columns, and all the responses that the respondents have, put in that assessment is captured in an Excel, and you export it, and there you have your record of processing activities. So an understanding of how to use Excel, and I'm not talking writing queries, macros, and all of that. No, your basic data entry, knowing how to, formula, how to make sure that your Excel is organized properly. You know how to wrap text, you know how to make it look, so basic Excel skill, very important, right? Then the big one is, in case you're saying, if I'm a business analyst, can I just switch into a GDPR role without necessarily understanding GDPR? I will tell you the answer is no. You will not be hired, because I've I've been on different panels. I've been trying to fill positions. So I've been a hiring manager on different roles. And if you sent me a business analyst role for a GDPR compliance project, and you do not actually have anything that tells me you understand the principles of GDPR, I won't hire you. I won't even look at the CV, because you have to understand you've got to have that regulatory knowledge. And I'm not saying the in-depth. I'm not saying you must have understanding of all the 99 articles. No, but at least the general understanding, general gist, let's call it that. And the core principles of the GDPR, you've got to understand it because if you don't, then it will be tricky for you to be able to do your job because you need to work. Because at the end of the day, even as a business analyst, you're working towards requirements, isn't it? You're working towards documenting, you're working towards gathering requirements, you're working towards analyzing requirements. For a GDPR project, is the same thing. You're going to have to be looking at what the GDPR requirements, what is the GDPR stipulating about different areas. So you've got to have a good understanding of the principles around the GDPR for you to be able to function. So that is a skill that you need to, and it doesn't take years and all of that. You can start reading up in weeks, months to get a general gist. And then as you go along, you keep developing yourself. Now, when I started as a GDPR, all I knew was GDPR principles and all of that. But by almost 9 years now, I have done California CCPA. I've done quite a lot of US state laws, Australia privacy laws, China. I've done and quite a lot. But again, these are things that have come over time, and it will not be expected that on your first role you should know everything because I mean, these laws and legislation are quite dynamic and fast-paced. They're changing all the time. Stakeholder management, very important as well. So again, knowing how to document. So again, when people come out and they reach out to me and I say, what is your computer literacy? What is, what can you do? Are you familiar with Excel? Can you, document and use Word? Can you put a presentation together? Those are essentials. And I'm not talking advanced level, basic level, but at least you should know what to do, because you're documenting. So as a GDPR business analyst, it's about putting all this documentation together. Even when you do your analysis, when you do your research, you've got to know how to document and to present it to the business. So that again, documentation and technical writing. So technical writing doesn't mean writing code, but at least technical understanding of the GDPR principles, requirements, as it were. Communication skills, again, I already mentioned, and I said because for this role, for you to be successful, you have got to know how to communicate, whether it's written or verbal. So you're talking to teams, you're talking to IT, tech teams, HR, every now and then to find out, all the things that you need to find out. So again, you've got to be a good communicator. And these things, they don't happen overnight. So don't be worried if you're like, oh, I'm not an excellent communicator just yet, but you can develop it over time, but it is an essential. Okay. So I put an example of Europa. I'll come back to that so you can see what this data mapping output, what it looks like. So you can see what I'm talking about. So that's all. That's just that about business analyst. So let's see the GDPR project manager role. Your key responsibilities, you will be leading the GDPR compliance projects and initiatives. So I'll give you some examples, real life examples shortly. You will be responsible for managing timelines, budgets, and resources for that GDPR project. You will be coordinating between technical teams, legal and business functions, business units. You will be tracking compliance milestones and deliverables because at the end of the day, as you are working on a GDPR compliance project. So what is a project? An endeavor that has a start and an end. So it's not an ongoing BAU initiative, but there is a project. For those of you who understand project management, so there will be a start and an end date. And so as you are tracking all the activities planned and the milestones, you have got to say, okay, how are we doing? What is the status of things? So the project manager is the one that does that, is the one that is monitoring how the health of the project. Are we on track? Are we off track? Are we going out of scope? And all of those things, just to make sure that we are not missing, the planned end date. And are we also delivering what we have said we will deliver? And because the project manager is the one that will speak. So in my experience, I've worked where I've been assigned a project manager to support as a data protection lead. So the project manager, all the project manager is doing with me is sitting with me in the morning to say, okay, what are the let's put a work breakdown structure. What are the activities that we are planning? What are the key milestones? When are we saying that we will deliver XYZ? And so I will come from a subject matter expert perspective, saying, okay, according to the GDPR, these are the requirements for us to carry out our data mapping initiative, as an example. And so, as we're fleshing out the requirements, the PM might say, okay, what do we have a rough idea of how long it would take for each of these tasks to be accomplished and all of that? And then he puts it in, or she puts it in a plan, and then we start tracking and monitoring this. If it looks like, oh, we might miss some, or we might go off track, the PM is the one that will kind of, where there needs to be escalation, he might or she might be doing that. Now, so again, you might be lucky and you find maybe a project manager assigned as, but in some cases, which again I've found myself in, where I am the subject matter expert, the data protection SME, but I'm also doing the project management. So again, it depends. Some organizations, they have the budget, they can have different people, on this role. So they would have a GDPR project manager, but in some cases, you who's the data protection subject matter expert, you are also doing your project management. You are the one that is putting your plan together. You're the one writing all the activities. You're the one monitoring and tracking and all of that. So that again, it does vary depending on where you find yourself. But now, if we want to bring this home, if, for example, somebody asked me that question within the Sterling Tech Academy, and they're like, okay, if they want to move into GDPR project management, what is expected of them? So these are the sort of things like you would normally project manage, but in this case, it will be a GDPR compliance project. So all the same things that you would normally do on, IT, non-IT related projects, you would typically be doing. So you're just monitoring, making sure things are on track, as it were. And then the question they asked me was, okay, as a GDPR project manager, are you expected to be knowledgeable about the GDPR? My answer is yes, because if you're not, you might struggle. Things will go over your head. And I've seen that. I've seen how a project manager had to, lost their job because after 3 months, they didn't seem like they were getting, good understanding of the GDPR principles, and they couldn't. It was tricky. So if you want to keep the job, you want to maintain the job, you've got to know what the GDPR principles, at least the very high level. So don't say, oh, I'm a project manager and I really don't care about that. You will not do well. So if you're thinking, okay, can I, as a project manager, go into GDPR, what do I need to know and things like that? So the key skills, project management methodologies, you may already have, or if you don't, so of course, most people will know about agile, waterfall, and different methodologies in project management. Now, for a GDPR compliance project, it is not, you don't have to go into too much detail because it is not like your typical agile or Scrum IT related type of projects. When you are documenting, when you are managing, when you are planning, is not, like, oh, Scrum, and all of that. But again, most of these things are interwoven. You just use what is relevant or suitable. So there's no expectation that you have to be you have to, delve into that much detail. But if you do find, it's just that it may not apply for a GDPR project. Okay. So again, like I said, a general knowledge about the GDPR and compliance, having an understanding is important as a PM. So things are not going over your head. You have to know. You have to understand, okay, what is lawfulness of lawful basis of processing when you are in a meeting and maybe the data protection subject matter is talking that, oh, okay, we have this list of processing activities now, and they ask questions around, oh, what's the lawful basis? Is it consent? Is it contract? Is it legal obligation? Is it vital interest? Any of that. And if you don't know what that means, it'll go over your head. And as a project manager, you've got to be able to hold your own. You've got to be able to say, okay, yes, okay, yeah, I understand what consent means under the GDPR. I understand what contract means. I understand this lawful basis. So when it's being discussed, you are not, in the dark. So it's important that you understand. Of course, team leadership, coordination, stakeholder communication, stakeholder management, budget and resource management, and all of us are just typical things that you would uh, need to understand. I will come to questions shortly, but let's paint a scenario, just in case you're like, okay, how can I piece it all together? We'll break it down, of course. Again, remember the focus is business analysts and project managers, how they function within GDPR compliance projects or programs. So I've also been, exposed to the fact that sometimes, what is going on with praise? Um, yeah, so it could be a project or it could be a program. A program is a combination of, projects, more than one. So you've got similar project or a list of other projects, as it were. And sometimes when you're working towards compliance, you would have maybe you break it down into work streams or mini projects that could form a program. So you could be a GDPR program manager. So you're managing more than one project. And each of these projects, they might have individual project managers, right? All working towards the GDPR compliance program. So you could be, so when I worked with a Canadian company, I was a program manager. So there were other projects that we were looking after, not just one. So again, just be mindful of that. Let's look at this scenario. An online retailer collects customer data. So example of customer data elements, names, emails, purchase history, payment information, IP addresses. Now, all of these that I've just listed and more will come under what is referred to as personal data according to the GDPR, right? So in this case, this email retailer is processing all of this information, and there's a reason. So you don't just collect all this information for the fun of it, but it collects this all of this data probably because one maybe when people land on their site, they are there's a form where people either are requesting, making inquiries or even making a purchase on their what's it called, on their website, as it were. And so as all of that is happening, that data is being collected, whether it's via the form or whether it's through you're buying something and it says enter your date, your card details, you're storing, you're saving something in the shopping cart, you go to checkout, and all of that. You're putting, maybe you want it to be delivered to you, you put in your delivery address. All of that is personal data. And these are the various personal data touch points in this scenario that this e-commerce business will probably be processing as well. So as a business analyst, right, and we're now saying, okay, maybe we're trying to map these data touch points in this scenario. What are you doing again? You are mapping all the data collection points. So whether it's website forms, whether it's checkout, whether it's email marketing, you will sit down. Nobody expects that you should know everything, especially if you're new and you've just joined and you've been assigned newly to that project as a business analyst. And we're saying, okay, this is your first task, for example. Okay. And essentially, this is what they're asking you to do. You will now go and identify the key stakeholders. You identify the various business functions so that you can ask them to say, okay, marketing, how do you collect personal data? Where are your data collection points? And they might say we have a website form, we have a checkout, or we also do email marketing and all of that. So you sit down and you document that. And that will now help you to say, okay, the marketing process, this is the data flow. These are the various data collection points, and this is where the data goes. Are they sharing with third-party systems? Is it being stored in CRM that are not, in-built or in-house built? They're not built in-house. They are third-party solutions that we use. So you will identify all of that and you make a note of it. You document it. Your data map is capturing all of that. So that is one thing that you will do. You will now say, okay, we share with third party, such as the processor, the what do you call it, payment processing system we use as an example, or if we are sharing the data for delivery. So the data has been captured on the website, and we now want, and that user has indicated that they would like the item delivered to them because it's an e-commerce platform, isn't it? So you would say, I want to deliver, and therefore this e-commerce business shares your data with the delivery company. So you see how the data flow is beginning to build and form or formulate, right? And so you now say, okay, these are the flows and all of that. We're sharing with third party, we're sharing with email service providers. We have analytical tools, we have Google Analytics on that e-commerce site. So you would have to investigate where all these data collection points are and how the data is flowing. A lot of so investigation technique here is it's not anything too technical. It might just be from talking to different business functions or different stakeholders or looking at documents or going on our website to say, oh, I can identify we have this form, that form. Then we ask, where is it going? Or you could create an assessment, a questionnaire. Okay, so that was how we started before we got a tool. I just created a list of these questions in simple Excel or even a form. You know how you create a survey and you send it to the respondents to fill out all of this information for you and you capture it, and that's you working on your data flows. Then you also document legal basis for processing. So is it consent that we are relying on for this personal data processing? Are we relying on contracts and all of that? Again, the reason why you need to understand the GDPR principles is so that you can work, it just makes your work easier and it's not something that is going over your head. Imagine if you're doing all of that investigation and you look at the GDPR requirement, it says, oh, document legal basis for processing, and you don't have a clue about it. You will be lost and you will find out going around the room, lost and all of that. So it's good that you have a good understanding of what it means. And so when you come across it, it's not strange. So you do DPIAs as well. You do risk you support, data breach and retention issues. We're not going into all that right now. And so what does the project manager? So that was the business analyst. The project manager creates projects timeline for compliance, coordinates with IT teams to implement, any of these remediation activities. So for example, we know that the GDPR will say that there should be technical and organizational measures in place to ensure data security and things like that. So that would need to be broken down and interpreted. And it could mean, oh, we need to put encryption. We need to make sure that we have access controls and they're different. And, again, the GDPR there are a few recommendations. It is not that prescriptive, but there's of course, there's guidance that you can look at, right? So the project manager, you will be coordinating all the relevant parties. So if there is a data protection subject matter expert, you'll be talking with them, bringing them into a meeting. If there's a project manager, so I've seen, in experiences I've had, we would have meetings like that where if there is a PM assigned, we are happy. If there's a business analyst assigned, and then if I'm the one leading as a data protection lead, we're there and we are working together to say, okay, what are the risks that have been identified as we have gone through this initial assessment? Then you as a PM, you will now plan, how do we mitigate these risks? How do we remediate? What are the remediation activities or action items? And so by the time you're sat down, again, nobody expects you to figure it all out. That's why you have subject matter experts, whether it is in form of the BA that needs to do some work or is the data protection SME. So you would have to bring all of this. You're just coordinating and facilitating these meetings so that everybody who is an expert in any of these areas, sometimes even legal. So I work closely with legal a lot because there might be some interpretation that we might need additional legal counsel. So you as a PM, you are the one facilitating and coordinating all of that activities as it were. So again, I think this is just a diagram of what I just mentioned. Okay, I'm going to pause and just in case there are examples, I'll stop sharing shortly. Sorry, if there are any questions, let me see. Uh, data protection and compliance frame. Okay. If there are any questions, none. BA with over 7 years interested in GDPR B. Okay. Alana. Okay, that's good. I'll probably unmute and talk to you guys shortly. Okay. So there's no question. That's fine. Okay, so if you've got any questions, please pop it in the chat. Another real world example is a software as a service company. My Canadian company I worked with was a SaaS company. And in this case, they process employee data from client companies. So their HR systems, payroll, performance reviews. So that is how they process. Again, please let me just make a note of the fact that personal data is not just customer data. So it also when you hear data subjects, which is again something that you see in the GDPR, data subjects could mean your direct consumers, your customers, or even your staff or your employee. They are human. They have personal data. You've got a name, you've got your first name, you've got your last name, and even though your email address will be business data, it also counts. So again, any organization who says they don't care about personal data that relates to their employees, they are just looking for trouble, because you also have to be mindful. So if you have staff all around the world, you've got to say, okay, then let's look at making sure we have the right controls in place for managing that, maybe HR systems, as it were. So as a BA, what do? You determine if the company is a data controller or data processor. That is super important. I'm not going to go into the detail now. I'll ask you to go and do more reading, because this is just a 2 hour long session, so we can break it down. If you want more detail, you've got to join the program and you have all the full detail. But you can read about who is a data controller or a data processor. But for the interest of this, I'm just going to quickly tell you, a data controller, according to the GDPR, is whether it could be even an individual, it could be a micro entrepreneur, it could be a solo entrepreneur, or a business, or an organization, that determines the means and purpose of data processing. So the person that said that the individual or the organization that is the one that determines how we process the data, what we use the personal data for, and all of that. Whereas the data processor is the one that would only, process the data on behalf of the data controller if there is an agreement between these two parties. So it means, in very simple terms, that the data processor would not, or is not allowed to carry out any data processing outside of what has been stipulated in the data processing agreement between these two parties. So let me give you a simple example. That e-commerce business is the data controller in that sense. So the customer who lands on their site, or their site, gives their data, puts all, maybe it says they want to purchase an item, then all that data is collected. But then if that end user says, I would like delivery, okay, and this data controller does not maybe provide, delivery service, as it were, but they will now share with a delivery, what do you call them, a courier, for example. They will now be the service provider that will provide that delivery service. So in this scenario, the data controller is the company, that the site that you let the e-commerce sites, for example, that company that owns that, then the processor is a delivery service provider. So they will be sharing your data for the purpose of delivering your item. And so there will be an agreement in place between these two parties, wherein the data controller would have said that we will share these personal data elements with you for the purpose of delivering any of our products that our customers have requested for. And you are not to use or do anything outside of delivering to their home address or whatsoever address they've put in there. And that data is all that you're allowed to use. You're not allowed to do anything. For example, you're not allowed to go behind the back of the data controller, maybe to start offering, anything outside of what's been in the contracts because you will be in breach. So it just means that the data processor would only do what's been stipulated in the DPA, the data processing agreement, by the data controller. They would only carry out instructions as outlined in that data processing agreement. So they are doing that on behalf of the data controller. So that is how, but you can read more about that. The business analysts also again map data flows between the SaaS platform, clients, sub-processor. So maybe there is a processor and a sub-processor. In another example might be DPD, Royal Mail. So they might have, in fact, they have independent delivery drivers, for example, who might be sub-processors because they will maybe because of the high volume, they might now hire independent processors or delivery drivers. So those guys, even though DPD is a processor, they could also have sub-processors, in the form of these individuals. So again, that's kind of how it works. But again, before all of this happens, this data processing agreement would have been written, agreed, reviewed, signed by all respective parties involved in this engagement. So as a business analyst, you again will have to ask the questions to say, okay, let's understand how this data flows. Who are the third parties? Are there, other, follower or maybe other fourth parties, let's call it that way for the lack of a good word, but again, just sub-processors. But all of that must be in the data sharing or data processing agreement before processing even takes place. That is in a I'm being careful because I would say in principle that's what is advised, but again in practice there might be a few push things that maybe not as I mean, just as you would understand with businesses, they might just not be as simple as I've just said it, but that's the gold standard, let's put it that way. So you also be identifying data retention requirements, deletion procedures. That is really around, okay, we now understand the data flow. The reason we are doing that, apart from being compliant with Article 30, we are also looking at ensuring that we have the right controls in place, in whether it's operational, whether it's data protection policies, again, like data retention requirements. So we collect all of this data. We know why we're collecting it. We have the lawful basis out there documented. But what does the GDPR say about how long? So there is what you call data minimization and all of that. So again, why if you need it for 6 months, 1 year, why are you keeping it for 5 years or 10 years? So that again is something that could actually get you into trouble as a business if you don't have retention policies, you don't have retention schedules. That is something that I know a lot of businesses kind of delay in putting in place because it's not easy to build to put in place. But again, it's something that is important just so that you have the right controls in place. You also be documenting data subject rights. That again is something that the GDPR stipulates. Again, because your data subjects, you have a right, you have rights. Under the GDPR, I think there's 6 rights. Now there are other laws across different jurisdictions that do not have as many data subject rights as the GDPR. GDPR has the most so far. And so what are those rights? Most of you know them, rights of access. So you can go to an organization to say, I would like access to all the data you hold about me, or I would like to be forgotten. I'd like my records deleted, or I'd like to port my data from here to here. So you've got all these rights according to GDPR, and you can exercise the rights. And so the organization must ensure that they've got, mechanisms in place that allows a fulfillment of these rights when they're data subjects are looking to exercise these rights. That's something that you as a business analyst might be helping to document. So you're speaking to the key stakeholders, you're helping them to document that if they have which they would have most times, maybe a subject matter expert that might say, right, okay, this is how it should be. Or in some cases, you might be expected to do the research to find out, okay, this is what the GDPR says. How do we put something in place so that people can exercise these rights? And how do we put internal processes to fulfill these rights or these requests? So, as data subject, you can request, but then there is fulfillment of the request. That again is something that organizations have. Most people have something. It may not be as robust. It might just be a link somewhere to a form where you can just exercise your rights, and and that information flows into an email. So it might be handled or managed by the BA, or if they have maybe an admin person who's manning the email, might say, okay, we've received these requests, they've come through, and then they will now, initiate their internal process to fulfilling these requests and things like that. Okay, so and then the project manager again, what you're doing is, oops, sorry, go back here. You are still managing the implementation of these agreements with clients. So you might not, in fact, nobody expects that you should know the details about how a DPA should be written. Most cases, there will be existing maybe templates or SOPs, as it were, and it won't be your role at all as a project manager to figure it out. But what you might be doing is coordinating the respective stakeholders, as it were. If, for example, we are looking to onboard a new supplier, a third party that we want to use, and we're going to be sharing personal data with, the first thing I would always ask when I'm reviewing DPIAs is, do we have a DPA in place? A DPA is a data processing agreement between these two parties, like I've just explained, with that e-commerce company and maybe a courier company. Before we start onboarding these third parties, we would carry out due diligence. So you as a PM, what you might be doing is you would maybe send emails to the third party supplier that we're looking to work with. And you could ask them, okay, things like, is there a data processing agreement in place? Can we have those copies? And you forward it on to the experts, the data protection subject matter expert, or even legal. Yeah, and legal might, maybe if legal are the ones that would review this, they would review it and all of that. But again, you might just be responsible for, managing and coordinating all of that. You could also oversee security infrastructure upgrades. So again, that might just be organizing those meetings, having the key stakeholders in those meetings, having those discussions based on what you would have planned in your project's work breakdown structure, or your plan, for example. So these are the activities, and maybe a few of the activities might be meet with all respective stakeholders, or maybe clients that we're looking to onboard. So you might do things as simple as put the meeting in, you chair the meeting, you know what the focus is, and all the discussions and all the subject matter experts will come in when they need to. So that might just be your role, especially with regards to maybe a GDPR compliance remediation projects. You also might coordinate staff training on data handling procedures. You're not delivering per se, but you might be managing reporting. So let's say, for example, there's a GDPR training that all staff are expected to undertake, or to make sure that they complete. So you might be responsible for coordinating reporting to say, okay, what is the percentage of completion so far, and things like that. So the detail might not be your problem, but again, maybe from a reporting perspective, you might be expected to do all of that. You might also be expect to manage compliance audit schedules. So again, it's still coordinating, managing all of this, the depth or the technical detail. Might you don't it's not so much your problem. Another big thing that I've seen again is vendor compliance certification. So again, maybe ISO 27001 or any of the ISO standards. It might be a project manager. Most times I've seen they would assign a project manager. So do you need to have this technical depth? Maybe not so much, but again, if it is at very senior level, they might expect that at least you get these things are not going over your head so that you can properly manage, these sort of compliance work. So these are a few, like again, I said, they are not an exhaustive list, but they're just a few of the things that you might find yourself doing. Any questions? I want to pause. If you've got any questions, just unmute and just say who's talking and ask your questions. Any questions? If not, we'll carry on. Okay, do we have something in the chat? Let me see. In case you don't want to talk. Okay. Okay, that's fine. Any questions? Is it all good? Okay. Oh, that's good. Right. So let's talk about job markets, opportunities, and why this is a good path to consider. And we can see there that GDPR compliance rules have grown. Back in the days, there was a lot of hesitation, speculation, because it seemed as though, oh, people were saying it will soon blow over. Businesses won't take it seriously, but it's taken seriously more than anything now because of, what is happening, especially with AI and how dynamic the world is, or our economies going. So and again, it's really about you and I and your data. So organizations are really trying to build customer trust, and so they're not just taking things for granted, but they're looking to ensure that they've got right, adequate data protection controls and measures in place, and therefore there is an increase in demand. Just to be aware of. And again, there's an increase in rise with new regulations. I mentioned that the US, some few years ago, it was just the CCPA, which was your California Consumer Privacy Act, although now it's known as the Consumer Privacy Rights Act, so your CPRA. But I know for the fact between the last, say, 2 to 3 years, some other US states have come up with their privacy laws as well. So it's not slowing down, it's not changing. It is actually, going even at a huge pace. So there is PIPEDA, which is Canada, the UK GDPR as well. And of course, it just means that there is a shortage of qualified professionals for this. So in case you're asking, does it have long-term potential? The answer is yes. And these are, of course, just a few starts there. Salary range, which again is why you should even care, because it's getting really difficult. Like, so you've got to have your take home has to make sense, because the cost of living crisis is something else, and that's a global thing. So for typically a GDPR business analyst, well, maybe from entry level, you should be looking at 45, whether it's $1,000 pounds to 75K. I think when I started, 70K was my because I started as a consultant, of course, and then went up to, so you can, and within a short space of time, between from going from 70 to 100 plus was within 2 years. So that's to tell you that it's the market is good. Project manager, you can see their senior roles will go between 80 and 130K. And so I also put a list here of hiring industries to look at: financial services, banking, healthcare, the pharmaceuticals, tech, of course, SaaS organizations, e-commerce, retail, insurance or telecommunication, and the list goes on. Top hiring companies, global tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, there is always jobs. Financial institutions, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and consulting firms, Deloitte, and these guys are always looking for. So the market is good. Let's put it that way. And I also did a quick live job market opportunity research. Now, these are just things that have just been posted or advertised not long. So like November, December, actually. And so you can actually attract 600 per day as a for remote roles, and senior information governance analyst, data protection officer roles, also across UK, Europe, Canada, US, all over the world. And I talk about the Canadian company I was working with. I'm in the UK. I never was expected to go into any office. So you can work remotely. For those of you who are looking for remote work, this is a good part to explore. You don't have to. I think the only time I went to Canada was to see a friend, but then I now went to see my team. But my contract was a UK contract for a Canadian company, and there are lots of people doing that. Living in the UK, working for US companies and all of that. So for remote working, it's a good one. Okay. And you could also look at contracts, permanent roles as well. They're quite flexible, whether as a GDPR business analyst or other compliance roles as well. So you would see different titles, right? I'm not saying that, like again, I said, you will not only see GDPR business analyst or GDPR project manager, you could see data protection officer, you could see privacy analyst, you could see information governance. So again, these titles kind of vary depending on um, the industry, the organization. So, like for example, civil service, NHS in the UK, you would see things like knowledge information management officer, right, which of course would mean maybe a privacy analyst, for example, if it was a private sector. So again, these titles, that's why when I say that when you're searching for these roles, don't limit yourself to maybe one or two set parameters. You've got to broaden it because sometimes they mean the same thing, but you've got different titles. So you've got to broaden your search. And I did a quick current market snapshot for 2025, December, all the way to Q1 2026. This was just a quick search that I did just with what did I use? I think I used one of the AI tools to bring that up. So you can see that it is looking good. There are openings, just in case you're wondering, and those are the sources right there. So let's quickly talk about the skills you need to and how to get them. So for example, as some of you have mentioned your background and things that you have. So again, it's always like, okay, I'm here today. How can I get to point B from point A where I am? Can I leverage my transferable skills? And if yes, which of these transferable skills can you leverage to start with? And then what are the gaps that you have identified, and then what plan can you put in place to identify these gaps? So for example, your core GDPR skills, what I've called the must-haves are, like I said again, time and time again, GDPR regulations and the knowledge of the GDPR articles are important. There are 99 individual articles. Nobody expects that you go and memorize them before you go for an interview. I didn't need to do that because at the end of the day, the business really doesn't care about you stating the articles. What they want you to do is to help interpret. What does it mean? What does this article mean? What does Article 30 mean by saying you should have a record of processing activities? How do you translate? How do you interpret that to the business? So they are more interested in you translating the legal terms within these regulations or legislation into business language for them to understand and not you. So that's why at an interview, nobody is going to say, can you tell me what Article 5 says or Article 30 says or Article 7? Or nobody's going to ask you that. but it's more how do you apply your knowledge and understanding of these principles or these articles, to our day-to-day, business. How can you, that's exactly what happens. So a good understanding of these, just the knowledge, and then there are some core, which we teach in the full class, the core articles that you need to focus on at least to get a job. Those are details you get there, but that is something that you need to know about. So these principles, these concepts, when you hear consent, what does it mean? It's a love is one of the legal bases. What does that mean? If you were going to interpret that to an organization, you're trying to say, we need to implement this. You've got to understand what it means and how do you interpret that? How do you translate that so that they understand how they can implement that in their business where needed. So just having a good understanding of this, and most of these things, maybe you can start by reading them, but again, that hands-on practical them experience is very useful. Again, we talked about data mapping and data flow analysis. That's also very important because most times that's where you start off. So anybody or any organization that is working towards compliance, they would want to say, okay, let's even do our data mapping. Let's map our data. Let's know our data flows, personal data flows, of course. You know what? Have a clear understanding of what personal data we hold, so that we can then think about the right controls to put in place to ensure data security and data protection, which of course, which is what the GDPR really is about. But we've got to know where our data is, first of all. So that's why having a good understanding of data mapping is a good skill to have. Risk assessment and mitigation also is something that you would need to know how to do on the job. So you hear things like data protection impact assessment, privacy impact assessment, all of these are risk assessments. Now with AI, there is also expansion into AI systems, as it were, or AI tools where you are assessing the risk and within an organization. So having that knowledge and knowing how to do that is also a skill that you need to think about. And then, of course, documentation is so important. All the policies, the past contract I just worked on, most of it was I was writing policies, for the organization. So again, knowing how to do those, and again, you don't have to know everything from day one. Let's put it that way, because some of these policies, in my very first 5, 6 years, I'd never done them, but as I, developed over time, you now know how to do these policies. But again, just knowing how to document as a standard is important as well. Regulatory reporting, again, that's something that you will learn on the job, or there are templates, there are ways that you can go about that. So these are the core skills I would say to have. Then let's look at transferable skills that you might already have. So some of you are business analysts. Again, remember that this webinar is focusing on GDPR BA and GDPR PM. And the assumption is that maybe there are some who already, in fact, I think someone says 7 years business analyst that you're thinking of. So again, you already have that tick in the box. So if you're looking at transferable skills, I think you joined later, but I was saying my very first contract was a GDPR business analyst, but I'd worked as a business analyst. So again, during the interview, they even asked me to talk about my BA experience, because for them it was important that that person had that BA background for that role. So again, so what does that mean? You would have been involved in requirements gathering, which again I've talked about. So stakeholder management, process documentation, problem solving, these are already skills or things that you already have or that you already do. So again, it would just be easy. A lot of the things that I ended up doing later on in my career were just me building on skills that I had developed before. As a business analyst, I understood how to do project management. And so all I was doing whilst leading data protection, what do you call it, work, was still pulling from these transferable skills that I've developed over time. So again, that will be a plus for you. Or you have project management experience, skill, familiarity, you know how to manage plans, you know how to plan, you know how to do your WBS, you know your budget and resource allocation, you know how to manage your rates, so your risk, issues, assumptions and dependency logs, you know how to do your report writing. All of those things are also very useful on a GDPR project, for example, or program. Or maybe you are from an IT technical background, so you're familiar with data security, system architecture, technical documentation, vendor management. Now, I've seen a few people that joined the November cohort have already, some of them have been in this space before. So that kind of, and they saw or they were coming in contact with teams working on data protection, GDPR, and they were interested. So that might be you. So you probably already exposed to maybe because you are in IT or maybe you are service desk and all of that, and you hear about data security, you hear about data protection, you hear about data classification. All of those things are already things that you're familiar with, and so you can then build all the additional elements on there. So from a transferable skills perspective, these are all very useful. Or maybe you are in the legal and compliance space. So we've also had people who have been KYC analysts, but they're looking to get into maybe data protection, as it were. Again, that might be, I'm not saying that you would have done everything that is required, but you'd have been exposed to maybe your GDPR team or your risk and compliance team, because there are touch points again within these departments. So you've got some regulatory knowledge, documentation, you know about audits. So you might be doing security IT audits and all of that. Maybe you're already exposed to that. That might be something that would also be useful and can be transferable. Or your QA testing, again, you are already exposed and you've got some experience, as it were. So you're not starting from ground zero. You just need to build maybe the knowledge of the GDPR principles, and the regulations might just be what is needed. And then maybe some practical hands-on experience, and you're good to go. Now, let's talk about how you build these skills. There are, again, you might find some jobs they will say should have, it might be desirable or essential. Some might be CIPPE, so for Europe, which is the EU GDPR. CIPM is a bit advanced, but let me just say that times have changed. But when I started, I think I just had IT governance foundation GDPR before I got my first job. So it was until 6 years, 7 years into it before I was, oh, CIPM, I need to do that and all of that. But now again, I know that times are changing. And so some jobs you'll see should have CIPPE, CIPM, but they're not automatic. The fact that you have them, because again, we've seen people who have joined our bootcamp, they've got the certifications, but the application of this is almost non-existent, because anybody can read and pass. These are good qualifications, but what you want to do is hands-on practical training, which is where we come in, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do. You could also even look at maybe starting by going onto Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera. There are mini courses. I think I've launched maybe two or so mini courses that will give you the initial foundation. If you're like, oh, I don't want to get in fully just yet, but I just want to get maybe let's just put my 1 foot in the water just to test and see. There are mini courses that you can start looking at. You can attend webinars like this to at least give you some knowledge or some thing to think about, which you can go away and do further study, further reading, and all of that. Or you can get a mentorship. I've been talking to somebody from the US who wants mentorship. So some people are actually maybe they just started the job as a data protection or privacy analyst, and they want a mentor, just for on-the-job support and all of that. That is something that, again, is an option. Okay. So quickly, I know I've talked about this, but again, just another comparison between the GDPR BA and GDPR PM, just in case you're thinking which part is right for you. Also, I want to ask for you to put in the chat. Yes, this has been a quick one, but what are your areas of interest? Would you be looking at a GDPR BA or a GDPR PM? Can I ask everyone to put in the chat? What would you be considering? Based on your current background, your experience, what you have seen or heard today, I would like you to put in the chat uh, which do you think you will be more suited to or you'll be more interested in? Put that in the chat for me while I get a quick drink and I'll be back. Okay, let's look at some. Okay. I would like to hear some people talk. Questions. I want us to take, I know we have 20 something minutes. I will talk about some projects we have in the pipeline, but I'd like to hear your voices. Help me. Okay. Mike, BA, yeah. GDPR BA Toasting, GDPR Project Manager, Miracle. What with what I have, I consider GDPR BA. Okay, let's see. Okay. Are you able to share some light on skills, transferable skills from education? Tell me more about that. Can you unmute, Sam? When you say education, are you teaching? What are you doing? Um, so because already as I'm thinking, a lot of people who have been in teaching, we actually have some people who were teachers for several years and they are looking to transition to GDPR privacy analyst. So again, education is quite broad. So if you've been teaching, so you are chances are that you know how to, that document management, being organized. So the project management element might be, maybe the GDPR project management element might be one that. So if you want to speak, please go ahead. Yeah, so education, teaching and curriculum management. So again, so document management, I would say that is something that you already have as a teacher. So you're managing curriculum. So I'm just thinking on a GDPR compliance project, probably the PM might be, or even the BA. It just depends on your area of interest, but managing documents because report policy writing, knowing how to organize, how to structure, because the fact that we talk about policies doesn't mean everybody, there are some key elements that should be in some policies. So if you're somebody that already knows how to organize curriculum, there are a few things that you will consider when you're organizing curriculum. So that might be something that you could bring on when it comes to documentation or organizing policies, writing SOPs, your standard operating procedures. So that might be, I think off the top of my head, those are just some areas that you could transfer from teaching and curriculum management. Records management is another area that you would find or hear about within this space. So records is just we were talking about data. I mentioned about data retention as well. So it just means, oh, what are the records that we have within the organization or personal data records that belong to employee, our staff, records of maybe subject access requests that have come in, records of complaints. So we should have a records management policy. Most organizations have that. Some call it the data retention policy, some say records management. So if that's something that you probably handle, report writing, I think most teachers do that because you would have to put your report together and maybe present it, whether it's quarterly or monthly or something. So if that's something that you're already doing, chances are that that might be easy for you as well. So those are some areas that may be transferable just off the top of my head. Okay, hope that helps. Does anybody have any particular question? I actually wanted us to look at a few.
So can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I have a background in GDPR myself. I work for the ICF, but
Okay,
I'm in public advice and compliance
okay,
and complaints. Sorry,
okay,
but I never knew that there's GDPR BA or project
okay.
management. So I'm actually not sure which one I could go into.
So tell me,
'Cause
I think you're low. Let me turn the volume up. So tell
okay,
me more about you, what you currently. So you work with the ICO as what now? Sorry, I'm trying to.
as public advice and
Okay,
complaint
okay,
analyst or officer.
okay,
Yeah, so
okay,
basically, I
okay,
advise people on GDPR matters, and I speak to DCs, data controllers, and data
okay,
subjects, and
okay.
I treat complaints from data subjects as well.
Oh, really? Okay, so you are
Yeah,
the ones we're always talking to. Okay,
yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah. So, but I obviously I want to move forward,
Move. Mm,
you know. Yeah. So
mm,
I'm not sure because from the description of what you said about BA and PM.
hmm.
It's like they both seem like
Similar.
similar, and also
Mm.
they are kind of related to GRC in a
Eh,
way.
yeah, in a sense, but it's GRC is quite broad, isn't it? GRC. So
Yeah,
yeah, you're talking governance, risk, and compliance.
yeah, compliance. Yeah,
Yeah, so but if you want to see where, if you are trying to work out where GDPR, you of course is compliance is under that GRC. So GRC I would say is like the broad umbrella
okay, all right.
but it branches out. There's governance, there's risk. But again, there are overlaps because even within your regulatory compliance, there is governance that you need to also think about.
Yeah,
Even, yeah, exactly. So there are just overlaps right there. But in terms of, and I agree with you that a GDPR BA, GDPR PM are similar.
very.
However, sometimes you might find the GDPR PM, in my experience, and I've seen that happen a few times, the GDPR PM might be involved in doing what you would typically expect a GDPR business analyst to do. So again, it
Okay,
depends on how, the how good, let me put it, or how skillful, no, let me not use the word because I can when I started as a business analyst, as a GDPR business analyst, I also knew about project management, right? So I was almost wearing two hats.
yeah,
Right. So I was still project managing. What does project management mean? Oh, you're monitoring and controlling the project. You are putting into place, all right, or at least documenting all the activities that needs to be carried out or needs to be done. You're putting milestones, you're putting
yeah,
timeline and all of that. So I've been in situations where even though I was the lead data protection manager, but I was doing project management as well. So I was responsible for managing my stuff. So I didn't have a PM. But in some cases, I was
Okay.
fortunate to have a PM and who was then booking the meetings. So you see how the PM is booking the meetings, facilitating those calls, sending out emails to all those stakeholders, and arranging those calls with IT and all of that. The PM does that more than the BA would be doing. So all the organizing, stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management, planning is more the PM, whereas the BA is more like boots on the ground, getting into the detail, doing the analysis, doing the data
All right.
mapping. The PM will not be doing involved in data mapping. If we were
Okay.
to split it that way, if they were to say, okay, from some of the things we've talked about now, for example, the very important one is data mapping. Nobody's going to ask a PM that is not already only if that PM has GDPR expertise and stuff like that. But most times, it will be the business analyst, if there is one. It's a business analyst that understands business process, understands how to map business processes, how to, say they want to draw
Yeah.
out the diagram and all of that, not the PM. So that is a clear distinction right there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then another question is,
Yeah.
because me, I just want to get a job. So,
Yeah.
yeah, do I need certification to get a job, or
No.
I can
So so
just
so
start
like
applying?
what I said, right? I
Yeah.
know times have changed. When I started, and a lot of people who have come through us they didn't have any certification before they got their first job. And so for me, it was more a few years after I said, oh, okay, maybe because I mean, I was kind of aiming for director level. So I wanted to get the CIPM and stuff like that. So
Okay. Yeah.
your hands-on is more than anything because we have seen people who have had CIPPE, CIPM, CISP, but they had no clue how to apply this in real world scenarios. So as a hiring manager, I won't hire you because you have all the CIPP certifications without any evidence of, your ability to do the job. I will not because I will just put your CV to the side. So it's simple. If I'm being honest, what I would worry about is how can I learn to do it? How can I learn to do the job? Because tomorrow I want to fill a position. I want someone that can hit the ground running, not someone who has all the certifications. And then I start worrying about how you're going to apply it, learn on the job, and all of that. No, but I want someone who's done it. So I would say focus more on getting the
Yeah.
hands-on practical experience. But now, that's not to say that because I wanted us to look at some jobs now, you will see desirable because you've got your essential and desirable. So some desirable will say you would have some of those CIPP, what you call certifications, but doesn't mean you shouldn't apply, right? It's not, some people say, oh, I saw it, I don't have it, I don't apply. No, don't just
Yeah.
apply, right? So to answer your question, you don't need, but it's advised that maybe as you are working towards getting the hands-on experience, you can then, get the certification on the side. But the certification doesn't give you an automatic job, but your experience gives you an automatic job more than the certification, if I may put it that way, for someone
Okay.
who's been in that space in a long time. So, okay.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me just quickly go back to my slides and finish, and then I'll talk to you guys about, is there anything in the chat? Some projects that we have. Okay. Please add this same function as a reputation manager role. No. So no. So I would like you who's asked Tulsi, if you find a job description, the data protection manager, again, this is semantics because sometimes these job titles you find may just be, they may mean the same thing. It's just maybe the person who's advertising or the companies that advertising has called it something else. A data protection manager role and a data protection facilitator role. The data protection facilitator role is not a common one because I just wonder what they're looking for is that something you have seen? If you have, please put the link in the chat because I would not expect a data protection facilitator role. It just depends. Again, maybe this is a public sector, Again, this really, really varies, but they are different, I would say. Data protection facility, yes, exactly, exactly. So NHS, So NHS, in fact, let's look at it quickly before I'm almost done. We just have a few slides, but let's even look at that. So your data protection facilitator, which is an uncommon title that you will find. So maybe that person will be in fact, I think I know what they'll be doing. They will be in charge of managing DSAs. So they will probably be, yeah, managing DSAs or coordinating, probably facilitating conversations around data breach incidents. So they'll be like quite junior data protection facilitator. Let me see what that. And yeah, exactly. So they will be the ones, maybe even complaints management, DSAs. They will probably be around the supports quite low. I'm just trying to find. Yeah. If you can find that particular one, please put it in the chat because I'm not seeing data protection facilitator. It's not the same thing as a data protection manager. Data protection manager is more senior. The manager, of course, might be managing some work streams within the data protection unit or department. So they'll be managing other things. Like I was a data protection manager, and then I became a senior data protection manager. What I was doing line management. I had a team of privacy analysts. I was writing policies. I was reviewing DPAs, and all of that. And again, this is private sector. It may vary in public, your civil service, NHS roles. I've been talking about the titles used in, for example, civil service, data protection and information governance manager. That's one I just found now. Let me quickly share that so you can see that depending again on where you want to go. So if, for example, for those of you who are probably looking, those of you who are maybe international student, international, or that require some sponsorship for work, I would say maybe you target civil service, NHS. Yeah, because chances are that you will get sponsorship within these roles. I'll share my screen quickly. I've just opened one now. So let's understand that. So if you require sponsorship, for example, I would tell you don't look for private. Yes, you might be lucky, but the ones that will give you more guarantee will be civil service and the NHS. And within that, the way that their titles are quite different in comparison to private. So I will. So okay, you saw that on Indeed. Let me share this. I'll show you what I mean. So you know what exactly they're looking for here. Um, okay. So data protection and information governance manager. Let's even pick that up. Can you see my screen, guys? Let's click this one. Okay. Data protection and information governance manager as an example. So this is like mid to senior level. Uh, um, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so for your data protection and information governance or information manager, you will support clients, no, okay, uh, individually at place and system level to ensure that it meets highly complex legal and regulatory obligations, act as a DPO to a range of clients. That this again is civil service. You should have a strong technical understanding on relevant data protection and information governance guidance, regulation, and legislation, maybe like the GDPR. Maintain a high level of recognized subject matter expertise in these areas, and all of that. So this kind of title is common within the civil services, if that is something you're looking for. So, but on the other hand, data protection facilitator, I haven't seen one, but let's even see if we can find. But I'm assuming it will be someone who is handling their DSAs and complaints, sort of coordinating quite junior. Maybe what you're doing is you're manning the email uh, that comes in when these DSAs are raised. So you are just looking, you're maybe tracking, you are responding to those emails. Come on. Okay. Sorry, I don't know why this isn't working. Okay, it's gonna go back there. Sorry. Yeah, so it's where am I? I'm here. Data protection facilitator. Yeah, so pretty much, I mean, because of time, I would say that it's not the same. The data protection facilitator might it's quite niche, I would say. Again, it's not a universal title, as it were. So I'm assuming because of we have 8 minutes, I can't go into it now, but it will be like NHS, civil service. I've not come across data protection facilitator, but I'm assuming it'll be someone who's managing their data subject access requests, maybe managing the email for the data protection team, because most times they would have a compliance team where all the emails around complaints would come in. So you might be handling that, or you might be facilitating meetings. Maybe there is a breach incident, and they need to, because normally when there's an incident, when there's a data breach incident, you would have to coordinate all the respective stakeholders in a meeting to address that breach incident. Maybe you'll be facilitating those sort of conversations because that is something that I'm just off the top of my head that I've seen, might mean what they're looking for. So you're a facilitator, you book the meetings, you will send the emails out to the key stakeholders, to security, to tech, to data protection, and all the relevant people to have this discussion to work out what are the next steps. So you might be facilitating those conversations, maybe training as well. You might be a facilitator for GDPR training. So again, it's not a universal title. It might just be something you find within the NHS, and I think it would be important to see what is expected. But from experience, I'm making these assumptions. But again, you look at that. I want to go back to my slides and just round up. If there are any questions, please feel free to pop in the chat. We're rounding up shortly. And so before I go back to my slide, the person who asked about certification, again, like I said, times have changed. A few years ago, you can get jobs without even nobody was bothered that much about that. But again, you see job descriptions and they say that. But again, the fact that it says, like again, I've been a hiring manager several years, and the fact that we put a job description, we ask HR to put a job description out, does not mean that we're expecting that person to tick off all the box 100%. So that's why within Sterling, I would say apply anyway, whether you have CIPM, CIPPE, doesn't matter, even though the job description clearly states that, says it, right? But don't hold back from applying. Just apply because, you just never know. Cool. Okay, we're rounding up quickly. Where am I? Okay, I'm here. Okay, so oops, can you see my screen? It's disappeared. Okay. Yeah. So I think this already, there's no need to go into it because I've already mentioned on a day-to-day basis, a BA, GDPR BA is doing data mapping. A PM, GDPR PM is never expected to do data mapping, not unless the person says, oh, I have the skill and they're looking for two for the price of one, then they can say, oh, come and do that. It is if they were to choose between these two functions for someone to carry out data mapping, because the BA already understands process mapping, business process, because that's where it sort of stems from. You are mapping each, so you're talking about the personal data flows, as it were. But like I said earlier, these data, personal data, will be linked to a business process. So whether it's that business process is linked is within sales, IT, marketing, so you as a BA, you already understand business process mapping. So chances of you knowing how to approach the data mapping will be significantly higher than a PM who maybe has not really done business process mapping and all of that before. So the BA will be looking at, the detail of data mapping, whereas the PM is planning. You're planning the remediation activities when the risk assessment has been done. We've been able to identify the gaps. We know the gap analysis is complete. We have a roadmap. We know what we need to do. You will now be the one that is managing and tracking and ensuring that, we're ticking off all the milestones that have been identified. You are PM, you are also reporting. So if there's a need to differentiate or to assign tasks, reporting tasks will technically most times be assigned to the PM and not the. So policy creation, risk assessment, stakeholder interviews, again, that's a BA thing. That's quite clear. A clear distinction. Now, this is ideal if you enjoy detail. So BA, GDPR BA, if you enjoy detail-oriented work, was it Tosi? I can't remember who said you can't decide yet. So again, maybe this might just be one thing for you to say. If you're the one, because you are boots on the ground, GDPR business analyst, you are going into details, you're doing the research, you're doing the analysis, and you're presenting to the business, where required and all of that. So if you enjoy analysis, if you enjoy conducting research, because some people don't enjoy doing that. You like working with data. We're not talking write SQL programming and all of that, Power BI stuff, not necessarily. I'm talking about personal data and documentation. If you don't mind doing that, then GDPR BA might be the one for you. Whereas on the GDPR PM side, you enjoy leading, organizing teams, facilitating, coordinating, and all of that. That might just be one for you. So I put here that the career path for BA, so you start as a business analyst, maybe, then you move on to GDPR senior BA, or compliance manager, and again, this is not a hard and fast rule because, like we have just seen, the NHS civil service is somewhat different to how compared to how private sector would, call this or name these titles. So just don't be hung up on any, but it was just an example that you could really look towards as a career progression or path. And salary progression, again, that's also not hard and fast. It could vary from 45K as an entry level, and you could go as high as 100 and or over 100K as an example. Okay, I think I already did that. This again was just common compliance challenges where a lot of organizations will need you to come in and help them to deal with. So for example, it might be data mapping. I keep talking about that because that is the biggest. I think when I worked on a data mapping piece, it took me 6 months to even scratch the surface. So because you can imagine how complex, this can be in most organizations, right? So organizations don't know where all their data is. They might feel like, oh yeah, these are 15, 20 core systems where we think personal data would be stored. And then they find, oh, there is email, there is HR drives, SharePoint, and all of that. So if you go in as a consultant and you say, do we know what our data flow looks like? You might get the answer that we're not too sure. So that is a complex one. And so you can come in to create that comprehensive data inventory and flow diagrams for them. That was where I started from several years ago. Or the PM, you can manage a project to complete that data mapping. So we had a PM who was managing the projects, but then I was wearing the hat of a BA, GDPR BA, and I was the one doing the data inventory, engaging the various departments to map that data flow. I was drawing the data flow with my Visio. So as a business analyst, if you have that person who has done 7 years BA, you would have been doing process mapping with Visio and different diagramming tools. So I was able to use that knowledge and experience even before we got a tool like OneTrust, which we now use to complete that data inventory. But again, these are things that you can pick up. Okay, so data mapping complexity is a challenge in organizations. Vendor management is a big one. Third-party vendors, sub-processors, creating compliance risk. Well, sub-processors, they create compliance risk. And so vendor risk management is a big topic. And I can tell you for free that a lot of organizations are still trying to manage that and put that in place, because especially if they are like very, big, and they've got thousands of vendors, right? So putting, first of all, having an inventory, that was something I had to do with one of the businesses I worked with. We said before we start talking about vendor risk management, we need to even know how many vendors. So let's inventory the vendors, and that would take weeks, months, even year or two, depending on the size of the organization. And then they now start saying, okay, what due diligence can we do? What control measures can we put in place? How do we manage the vendor risk that we're talking about? Because that is another area that could be a potential loophole within an organization. So the vendors that you're sharing the data with, then these vendors could on the downstream have sub-processors that, so you can see how complex it is. And therefore you can come in to start with assessing the vendor compliance requirements. What does the GDPR say about third party sharing data with third parties? So that's something you also want to look at, which will now help the organization to say, okay, these are the things that we need to start tackling. Do we have data processing agreements in place? Which ones do we have for? And the ones we don't have for, how do we put a mechanism in place to help us address that? So you see why that would be something that you could come in, whether as a BA or as a PM. Data subject rights, oh my goodness, that is something that very recently I couldn't even imagine that that volume of data subjects requests would come into a business. Like we were getting it every day. So that is something that is an area. And I know within civil service and the NHS, I think they would have dedicated roles that may be like that data protection facilitator might, all you're doing is managing DSARs or managing these data subject rights requests. Because again, depending on the level of volume that you receive, they would have to have a mechanism for managing that. They would have to have maybe some SOP where everybody knows what to do and all of that. So that is an area again that you can come in and help an organization. Cross-border data transfers, that's another big one, especially for those that are sharing data outside of their local jurisdiction. Maybe those that are in the UK sharing data with US, Australia, and all of that. There needs to be a legal mechanism around data sharing. So the data sharing agreements needs to be in place, and the GDPR already gives or stipulates what we should do when there is cross-border data transfer. There is cross-border data transfer agreements that needs to be put in place, and that is something that you could also have. So you have your standard contractual clauses, your SEC, your binding corporate rules, all of this you will find within the GDPR. So again, it just depends on what the organization is going for, but all of these are things that there. And then this another one I put there is staff training and awareness, because I think the weakest link are usually your staff, and a lot of data breach incidents that will come will be, oh, some staff forgot very recently, or maybe they're sending an email to, I don't know, group, and they don't BCC, or they just send to the wrong, so it could be these guys need to be trained. They need to know all the checks that they need to do just to make sure that they're not making these sort of mistakes that could cost reputational damage, or cost the business, one thing or the other that is negative. So again, staff training and awareness might be something. So the person who maybe is in education, probably that might be an area to even look at. So you know that you know how to develop curriculum, because again, you've got to be able to, if depending on the organizations, I've been in some places where they already have standard GDPR training, some CBT kind of suites and all of that. But in some cases, I've been asked to put a strategy together for the training and awareness program, as it were, so that it is more regular. And again, that is a way that it can manage, these sort of incidents that could happen, and that would probably due to human error. So maybe if you're someone that knows how to develop training, that you just will transfer that to GDPR training. So you know how to, okay, what are the things to look out for? What are the elements of a good training? So that might be an area as well to look at. And now this is not an exhaustive list, of course, but these are just areas that organizations are experiencing. Okay, let's talk about what next? So I'd like to introduce you or tell you about, for those of you who want to get onto this path, before I go into this, Sterling Tech Solution, we have some external client projects in the pipeline. So we have our September, November cohort who are working with a charity, and then we also have a legal firm that we are working with, and we're planning to start in January. So there are projects in the pipeline which is useful for you to gain hands-on experience. It's one thing for you to get all the qualifications and get all that knowledge, but if you have not been, we had a few people who, I think they had started attending interviews. They got their training from somewhere and started attending interviews, and there are some things that they had learned, but it was not something they could interpret or articulate properly during the interview because they hadn't gotten the hands-on practical. Because when I'm interviewing you, I'm not going to say, oh, what are the lawful bases? I won't ask you all of those questions. I'll ask you about real life scenarios. What are the challenges? How would you deal with pushback from the business where if, for example, you have been assigned to help with our data mapping initiative, something like that. So if you haven't done that, chances are that you will waffle because you'll just be talking textbook. Whereas I want you to tell me real life practical scenarios. So that's why we don't do case studies, we do real experience because I believe that that is what will give you the confidence to be able to get on the job or to even get to an interview and to talk like someone who has done it and not reading from a textbook. So one of the ladies just said, "Oh, I'm joining." So now they're working on external client project for a charity where we're looking at UK GDPR compliance audit for them. Then we put together a program where they are maintaining their compliance posture and all of that. So these are all very practical experiences that you would have if you come on board with us. So the 8-week bootcamp program is intensive, is hands-on, is very practical, but is flexible in the sense that it's done weekends and evenings. So everyone that is on our bootcamp still goes to do their job. We have people in care, nurses who have shift work. It doesn't disturb them. So let's talk about what you will gain. We have a 12-week program, but we've had some people say, "Oh, I want to get a job quickly. Is there a fast track? Is this 8 weeks?" So I said, "Okay, I'll talk about that." So what is the breakdown? Week 1 to 2, we're talking about this GDPR fundamentals and regulations because you've got to understand it, whether as a business GDPR BA or a GDPR PM, like I said. So you can't move from 7 years as a business analyst without an understanding or knowledge of GDPR fundamentals. You cannot get a job, and I'm being honest, as a GDPR BA because you need the GDPR fundamentals. You need to understand that. You need to be able to interpret that. So that is a fundamental, which we start with, and then the regulations as well. Then week 3 to 4, data mapping, I talked about it a lot because that is like the bread and butter, is the core, it's very important. So knowing how to do that, then we'll look at how do you do privacy risk assessment, which is also very important. With the AI advent now, everyone is talking about risk assessment with regards to development of AI systems and solutions. That is something we look at. How do you risk assess? How do you consider AI governance within an organization? So that is something we have templates and guidance provided for that one. Then once we've done the theoretical part, you go straight into a real life project where you'll be exposed to carrying out a UK GDPR compliance audit and implementation. Yes, it's 4 weeks, but it's very intensive. So we are meeting you're meeting the client and you're meeting as a team for 4 weeks to get that done. And then we round up with group job preparation. So CV, how do you write your CV? How do you craft it? How do you use AI in a sensible way that meets civil service or NHS requirements if that's where you're looking? and then interview prep as well. And that's kind of what it covers. So again, what it just includes is makes you job market ready. It's not certification based. You're not writing any exam because we believe in hands-on. We believe in getting you job market ready or on your own. Now we can signpost you to where to go to, CIPP, CIPPE, CIPM, whatever of those certifications. We can signpost you to One Trust, Trust Act. There are a few of the sites we recommend. So you can do that on the side, but our focus is helping you to be market ready so that by the time you are finished, you're confident to attend interviews because you have worked on hands-on on a real project. You know how it is, you know the real ins and outs. And if you are asked at an interview, you know what to do. And then, of course, the job search strategy, you'll be part of our community, hundreds of people who are also on this path, and we have our internal team to support you as well. This one I just said, so if you're looking to do a career switch, so maybe for someone who is in education, who wants to get onto this, or a business analyst thinking to move into GDPR BA, is for you. That's why I've put that there. And so uh, this is the pricing and enrollment and investment. Now, this is the least we've ever offered on anything, but we just thought we'll do this time. So if you would like to join here for £500, it's never been done, but we're doing it. It's Christmas bonus for the 8 weeks program. The standard price is £650, which is also a new fee that we're doing. But within 24 hours, if you'd like to sign up to get that early bird discount, you can do that. And there's also a payment plan using Klarna. You could use Klarna to spread it across 3 installments. And this is all that you get, 8 weeks of comprehensive training, 8 weeks. And I know we give like a week or 2 weeks bonus, all course materials, a real life project, lifetime access to the materials and recording, career coaching. And our next cohort starts in January, but registration is now. And these are just success stories, I think, and that's it. So if you would be interested in joining us, this is that's what's on offer. And I think there's a phone number. Praise, can you just put the phone number? We didn't put the links. Just put the phone number, or you know how to respond to us. And we hope to have some of you join us because everything goes back up in January, but this is just an offer that we are making today, and it lasts for 24 hours only. Only 10 spots anyway for this cohort because we go back to our normal rates. But yeah. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Anything that you think you just remembered that you'd want to ask? Please feel free to ask. So do we have anybody joining us? Everyone's gone. Everyone is quiet now. Anyone, we hope that some of you will join us at this early bird discount because it is one that has never been done before, but yeah, that's what it is. Okay, I think if there are no questions, Praise, are you in here? If you can just drop the number. So I think most of you, yeah, so there is a number that has been dropped in the chat. Please click on that number and send us a WhatsApp to say I would like to take the offer, the 24-hour offer or discount. So so the people who are giving the thumbs up, are we seeing you? Are you Tosin, Dami, Ugochi? Will you be joining the 10? So the top 10, once we have 10, we will close that offer and it's just available for 24 hours and it goes back. Okay, so if there are no questions, I hope you found this useful. Please go ahead and do more research and send us a chat message to sign up. So once you sign up, we resume in the new year. in January, I think 5th or so. But as soon as you have registered with us, you have all the details that you require. And we look forward to having you on to join our community where you meet hundreds of other people as well. So thank you for joining this webinar, and I wish you all the best and a happy new year in advance. Thank you.